brother! Guys, in the Harry Potter series, lineage matters like a lot. Like where they come from is so important all the time. And specifically with Voldemort or Tom Riddle, we know a lot about his father and that he's a descendant of Salazar Slytherin. But one thing that we know seemingly nothing about is his grandmother, or as I like to call her, Nana Mort. Personally, I think it is super interesting who she is, and I think we discovered exactly who she is. Today, we discuss. Hey, brother! In the Harry Potter series, it seems like almost everybody is connected to everyone else in one way or another, and that is no exception for Tom Riddle, aka the Dark Lord himself, Voldemort. Old Tommy Boy is of course descended from Salazar Slytherin himself by way of the Gaunt family. When we meet his grandfather and middle namesake, Marvolo, he is living in a decrepit cabin in the foothills of Little Hangleton with his two children, Morphin and Merope. And these two are nothing short of cross-eyed, barely capable of speech or magic for that matter. This is where I think it's really easy to not pay the mother of these two children all that much attention. For one, she's not there at all. And for two, Marvolo just so loves to boast how he is part of the last living descendants of Salazar Slytherin. And that's kind of all we need, right? Tom Riddle is related to a super important and powerful person in the wizarding world. And it's just proof enough that he is the heir of Slytherin. And while it's super interesting to meet Voldemort's mother and her family, I think it's just as interesting to try to figure out where they came from. I mean, not for nothing, but it just seems kind of unlikely that Marvolo Gaunt would have been capable of attracting anybody, or that he would lower his bar to anything below pure blood status. Which I think provides a particularly interesting mystery, because the other thing that we know about all the pure blood wizards of the day is that one way or another, they're all related to each other. Which I personally think provides for a very interesting mystery, because all of the pure blood wizards, as we know, are all kind of related to each other due to the limited quantities of available witches and wizards that are in fact pure blood. But what makes that so interesting is that because there's such a limited pool of people, it's entirely possible that we know exactly who this person actually is. Okay, so for this to make sense, we're going to have to get some dates squared away, because all of this is going to be happening a few generations ago. So let's start with Morphin and Voldemort's mother, Merope. We know that she died giving birth to Tom Riddle at Wool's Orphanage on the date of December 31st, 1926, at 19 years old. Quick math will tell us that that means she was born in 1907. And all we really know about her father, Marvolo, is that he was born sometime before 1890, meaning that when he gave birth to Merope, not when he gave birth. Yeah. That would be weird.
That's some magic for you.
That's some magic. Now, all we really know about her father, Marvolo, is that he was born before the year of 1890, meaning that he was at least 18 years old when he had Merope. Now, trying to sort through the entirety of the wizarding population in the late 1800s is challenging for two reasons. For one, it's monotonous and boring, and I don't want to do it. And two, we don't exactly have the late 1800s wizarding census just lying about. But we do have three things, the first of which being that we know for a fact that Marvolo Gaunt would not have mated, which just sounds with anything short than another 100% pureblood. Second is a semi-comprehensive and biased list of all of the known pureblood wizarding families at the time, known as the Sacred 28. And finally, we have access to two shockingly detailed family trees of two very famous pureblood wizarding families. The first of these is the Lestrange family, thanks to the Fantastic Beasts movies, where apparently this family was just huge. Something that I found particularly interesting, considering the fact that the most famous Lestrange that we have in the story thus far isn't even born into the family Lestrange. Bellatrix just happened to marry one. Rodolphus is actually the true Lestrange of the couple, and as far as I am concerned is about as useless to us, the audience, as he is to Bellatrix as a husband. I mean, some popular fan fiction even suggests that she had an affair with Voldemort. I know we make fun of the cursed child a lot, but honestly, could there be a more fan fiction sentence than Bellatrix and Voldemort had a child? Either way, it kind of actually works out though, because it just so happens to be the case that the family that Bellatrix actually hails from is the other family we have a very elaborate tree for, the Black family, which is where we are going to focus our attention on for today's video, because we think we may have found something very interesting high in the branches of this deep-rooted family. Do you see what I did there? Branches and roots, both tree words. I'll just leave it there. The bad news, though, is that when it comes to examining this particular tree, it's a little difficult to read because of like the old smokestack filter they applied to the movie, even if you're not trying to see in between Harry and Sirius's shoulders. And even trying to get a clear image of it online is tricky, but don't worry, the folks over at Pottermore totally saw this problem and solved it for us. They actually gave us our own super easy to read version with like little blurbs about each of the characters. It's really cool. Although seeing it in this format kind of lends a little bit of understanding to why the Blacks made it so hard to read to begin with, because there are some weird connections. For example, did you know that Sirius's parents' grandfathers were brothers? Well, they were. Welcome to my pain. Anyway, the trick here was trying to figure out who the most age-appropriate person would be to, like, have potentially met up with Marvolo. So again, to refresh, we know that Marvolo was born on or before the year 1890, which brings us to this row of the Black family tree, which is represented by the 5 children of none other than ex-headmaster of Hogwarts and just general pain in the tuchus, Phineas Nigellus. Hoggy Hogwarts! Of his 5 kids, 4 of them are sons, and of those, 3 of them have clear paths down the tree. His namesake, though, Phineas the Ferb Jr., never had kids or married. Which leaves us with his one and only daughter, Belvina Black. Belvina is interesting because, as you can see on the tree, she is married to none other than Herbert Burke, as in son of Caractacus Burke, owner of Borgin and Burke's. You know, the famous dark arts peddlers that none other than like Tom Riddle himself goes on to work for. What makes it even more interesting, though, is that if you click that little blurb on Belvina, you'll actually find out that she has 3 children, but their identities are a mystery. And now, of course, we know that this is not like wholly uncommon for the Black family, who was pretty well known for basically just disowning anyone who didn't walk to the beat of the family's drum. Which is a weird drum, if we're being honest, and I'm not even sure it's actually a drum. It might have just been a barrel. To be fair, everyone does need a good barrel, but I would never call ours a drum. I would call it Chelsea. That's a joke from our last video. But I do find it particularly interesting that we are made aware of the fact that she does have 3 children, but their identities are a mystery. Like, why? On that note, you might even just be wondering like why we zeroed in on like Belvina at all. Like, it appears that we know exactly who she was married to and that she had kids with them, and that should normally just like give her a pass, right? And normally, yes, I would agree with you, except for the fact that Belvina finds herself like at the crossroads of several other major Voldemort mysteries. For example, we know that Dumbledore explains to Harry that Voldemort reserved the making of his Horcruxes for particularly significant murders, and that he was planning on making Harry the final one, simultaneously wiping out the most significant threat to his cause and making himself immortal by way of having a 7-piece soul, which is the most powerfully magical number. Whatever that means. This makes a lot of sense when Dumbledore explains it, except if you start to dig into who he actually killed to make some of these Horcruxes, it doesn't totally hold up. I mean, honestly, some of them just don't even seem that important at all. Moaning Myrtle was first for the diary, and okay, like I can sort of get that, like his first murder, and that was by way of the basilisk, which was proof of his actual lineage to Salazar Slytherin, so that was a pretty big deal to him. For the ring, he killed his father, and yep, no further explanation is really needed there at all. The cup was Hepzibah Smith, which like, maybe not that important, but at the very least, she was a descendant of Helga Hufflepuff, so there's that. Especially when you consider the fact that the Horcrux he was making with her death was Hufflepuff's cup. But then there is the locket and the diadem, and we don't actually learn in the books who he killed to make each of these, but J.K. Rowling has actually told us in an interview. The diadem was created by killing an Albanian peasant, and the locket was created by killing a Muggle tramp. Which, I have to say, those don't sound very important, do they? Like, I feel like that's almost the exact definition of the word peasant, and a tramp is, you know, like someone who gets around. But if Voldemort chose them, then they must have had some kind of significance to him. And today, I think we can finally explain one of these, because I think the Muggle tramp that Voldemort killed to make the locket is none other than Voldemort's grandmother, Belvina. or as I like to call her, Nanamort, who you might be correctly pointing out was a witch and not a muggle. But I don't even think the distinction is that obvious, because I don't actually think she was either of those things. I think she was a squib. For one, I think being a squib would be more than enough reason for the Black family tree to not be keeping track of her children, because to this like elitist, pure-blooded line, that would be like a total disgrace. Plus, if you look into the etymology of her name, you will find out that it does not follow the Black family tradition of naming their children after stars or constellations. Belvina actually means beast or monster, which, if you ask me, is a fitting name for someone who they believe to have no magical ability whatsoever. To be fair, they wouldn't have known that when she was born, because a lot of times magical ability doesn't appear until much later in life, but it's not unlike J.K. Rowling to name somebody after something they would ultimately end up being. Remus Lupin, anyone? What makes this even more interesting is if you look into the meaning of Merope's name, because it turns out Merope is named after a star, specifically the 7th and dimmest star in the Pleiades constellation. On top of that, Belvina is actually not the only person to not be named after a star in the family. Take Narcissa Black, for example, who is actually named after a plant, and narcissism, who we know of course goes on to marry Lucius Malfoy, and they have a son, and what do they name him? Draco, a constellation. At the very least, there is a pattern here, or as they like to call it, a constellation, even though these things never actually look like what they say they do. So here is what I am suggesting. Belvina Black brought her family shame by being born a squib, and also by going on to have an affair with Marvolo Gaunt, therein producing the star pupils of the wizarding world, Morphin and Merope. Belvina, who possessed little to no magical ability, went on to live her life until the age of 76, where she died in 1962, a year that might actually have more relevance than you think. You see, because after Tom Riddle left Hogwarts, he was offered all sorts of jobs at the Ministry of Magic, but turned them all down instead to work where? Borgin and Burkes. Dumbledore's explanation for this is that he wanted a place where he was going to be able to track down rare, dark, magical artifacts, which might have been half of the truth, but I actually think there is another half. And that is that the shop was founded by his grandmother's real husband, and he wanted a way to track her down just like the rest of his family. While working there, we know that he did eventually track down Hufflepuff. She's real buff. While working there, we know that he did eventually track down Hufflepuff's cup and Slytherin's locket, both of which he stole after murdering Hepzibah Smith. And do you know what year that happened? 1961. And what happened just 1 year later? Belvina Black dies. In one move, he steals back the locket that Borgin and Burkes swindled from his mother, and kills the wife of the founder's son. Very clean. Guys, this just all fits together so well. Like, why someone he killed for a Horcrux was a Muggle tramp, and why he specifically killed her in order to make the locket. Why Voldemort worked at Borgin and Burkes of all places, and why Belvina's children are a total mystery. Not that I'm entirely certain that was a huge mystery that people were trying to solve. In fact, I think it even goes one step further to further reinforce Voldemort's just lack of love. Not only was he the direct product of a forced and unwanted marriage, but then also his mother would have been the result of an affair with very questionable motives. And that just puts together two huge pieces of the way that Tom Riddle and Voldemort view the world. He entirely lacks love and totally values pure-bloodedness. Guys, personally, I am 100% sold on this, but for my question of the day, what do you think? Was Belvina Voldemort's Nana? Leave your thoughts in the towel section down below. Also, what do you call your grandmother? We were just grandma people, both sides, just grandma. Also guys, if you are new to the channel or have been around for a while, we have put together our annual Super Carlin Brothers survey to get a better idea of the kind of content you guys want from us. So it takes about 8 to 10 minutes total. Link is in the description down below if you don't mind filling it out. It helps us just so very much, and thank you in advance. But guys, as always, thanks for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you'd like some more Harry Potter action from us, you can check out this video right here where we talk about how we think the last Horcrux Voldemort was going to make was the Sword of Gryffindor, or right here to find out how Hagrid might secretly be a millionaire. But Jay, that's all I've got for you today, man. I'll see you on Tuesday.